We're in.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Dungeon Delvers. He's Gene,
He's Renny,
and
and
together we
we
are
are
unconventional
unconventional
heroes.
heroes.
I promise the timing will get better. No, it
It
won't.
will not get. Hold on, let's
Uh,
high five. Ready? High five. 1, 2, 3. You no other
I went
way,
the
other
wrong
way.
way.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, woo.
Yeah, we'll get there, guys. We'll get there. So thank you for joining us, and tonight we are going to tackle a dungeon, but we'll get there in a second. Um, I guess let's talk a little bit about what the show's about. So me and Gene often have long, probably too long, conversations about all things nerd. A lot of times it's D&D, but not every time. And we have this wonderful format, and we thought between us we almost have over 40 years of gaming experience, of insights, and we thought, heck, we chat like this in our free time, let's chat like this on your time. uh, so Gene, why don't you talk a little bit about your gaming background, your gaming experience, and just give the people a little taste of where you come from in this.
All right. Well, as Renny said, I am Gene, and as my mother used to joke, she used to say that I was gaming in utero, because at an older science fiction convention called Lunicon up in Rochester, right?
Yeah, Rochester, New York.
Rochester, in a fucking non-Euclidean hotel. My mother and father ran the small albeit gaming section, and Rennie and I, from being born till many years ago, would run gaming up until a point where we actually ran the gaming when our father was ill, and we handled that, and it was awesome. And that was kind of our lead into running things and kind of being in charge of storytelling. And so from there, before that, our dad would often run us in kind of story adventures that were based off kind of the bones of D&D, but none of a lot of the hard math. Like, I didn't need to know Thaco when I was that young, but I did learn it
But
quickly.
you know it now.
But I do know it. And so our dad encouraged us to read and be imaginative, and in order to start playing with the adults, we had to learn how to read the player's handbook, and that was honestly one of the first books I probably knew how to read. And we developed reading very quickly, and we were playing D&D and other games most of our life. And so, obviously from Dungeons and Dragons, we then moved into a few other gaming types, and tabletop. One of our favorites, where Rennie and I really got hooked and cut our teeth, was Deadlands, which is like a weird west wild fantasy. And Rennie and I ran some fucking crazy, which kind of games, and we really loved it. And so we eventually, Rennie started a LARP, and we ran a sweet Deadlands LARP with my dad and a bunch of our old friends together. And I wrote the rules on like 18 diner placemats.
Fueled by nothing but coffee, cheeseburgers, and sleep deprivation.
Oh man, and a little bit too much chain smoking back when you could smoke in diners.
That would be what I was
But I
running
didn't do
on
that. I didn't do that.
when when we wrote this thing.
But yeah, we ran that LARP for many years, and then dabbled into a few other games like Legend of the Five Rings. And then we kind of ran our own LARP where we made up, which was very dark, a concrete jungle, as you were. And eventually, I and Rennie both got into Boffer LARPing, where I took a prominent lead, kind of storytelling for many different Boffer LARPs over the days, and now I am currently the head storyteller of Dead Legends, a Weird West Boffer LARP. Go figure.
Yeah, right. Weird how you transition there.
Weird.
Uh, um, yeah, no. And Gene's also being modest. He's been at nearly every level of gaming you can be at: storytelling, game design, a player many, many times, but prop master, storyteller, mod runner. Gene has kind of done it all in the gaming world. I've probably done almost everything in the gaming world. Gene has done everything in the gaming world. Um, but yeah, so a little bit about me, I suppose. So a lot of that is a kind of shared experience. Is that's sort of the one of the big through lines between the Stern Bros is that no matter the shit that was happening in our lives, we had games that we played together, and it's been pretty consistent, Gene, for I don't know 20 plus years. It's
I,
been pretty
I mean,
consistent that we've had.
you were gone for a few years, but
I was.
we still try to make that game work every few months.
One day we'll finish it, Gene. One day.
You're lying to yourself, but okay.
Yeah. Let me have this, okay? Let me
Okay,
have this.
sure. We'll definitely finish it. Oink, oink.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, but like Gene said, I've run I started a Deadlands LARP with a bunch of my friends, with my family, which ran for nearly a decade, which was super duper fun. An L5R LARP that didn't last quite as long, but still great. I ran other people's LARPs a lot. Um, and
But Rennie, as this main person who is billed on this LARP, I'd like to ask you what happens. Tell me what happens.
would you like your DM NPC to win? Because you could let your DM
Oh yeah,
NPC.
no, I would like that, please.
No, no problem, guy. But yeah, I mean, I've helped with game design. I've done a ton of storytelling, story writing. I ran the game for a long time, so I am not currently the head storyteller of anything but my own fantasies. Um,
You're
um,
doing a bang up job.
thanks. I we agree, as it turns out. So yeah, so together, we're only in our 30s, but we have almost 50 years of gaming experience together. And we thought that this would be a wonderful format to kind of share our experiences and some of our insights, and a very important key factor, our opinion. And I'm gonna repeat that for the people in the back. This show is mostly opinions.
Yeah.
So please don't take what we say as fact. We are not doctors. We are not authorities on anything but our own
In
experience.
the immortal words of Tenacious D, it was a matter of an opinion.
Very much that. So yeah, we hope you enjoy the journey, and we think we might have something that you can take away from it. Speaking of you, so you may know us from Curse of Strahd, run by the lovely Julia May Staley, and we have been players in that for a little while now. But in that show, we don't really interact with our audience as much as maybe we could. But this show is different. It's new. It's just us. It's you guys. It's us. And so what we'd like to do here is we're gonna delve into this dungeon just a second. And if you guys hear us talking about a topic, if you guys hear us make a point or allude to a story that maybe we don't want to tell, or maybe we're moving on with the subject, please ask questions in the chat. Our moderator is kind of watching you and standing by, not in a weird way.
Definitely a weird way.
Um, all right, it's a little weird, but if you're here, you're a little weird, and that's fine. Um, so yeah, so if you have some questions, guys, please ask them in the chat. We have sort of reserved a section towards the end of our program to answer some fan questions, some audience questions, and maybe give you, the answers you're looking for. Hopefully, maybe we'll see. I think that's all I got, Gene. What about you?
Yeah. So yeah, if you enter your questions into chat, we'll do our best to try to get to them by the time we get to the room that is the fountain of reflection.
Reflection, reflection, reflection.
And besides asking us questions on our current topic, you can ask silly questions and we'll try to answer them. And also, you can suggest topics either in our chat for us that you'd like us to discuss, or at our Twitter handle, which is Uncov Heroes, or at our I guess you could go to our email, which is unconventional.heroes, heros, at gmail.com. If you have any topics or subjects you would like us really to go over, and we'll try to get to it. So today's dungeon is dun, dun, dun,
Dun, dun, dun.
what does it mean to be a good player? And so we are going to delve into that dungeon. And here we have decided to start a tradition which goes in theme, which is Renny and I will roll initiative to see
I mean,
who.
we're in a dungeon. I mean, initiative, we gotta.
Yeah, to see who goes first. So without further ado, Renny, why don't you roll initiative?
All right, here I go. Let's see how I do. 18. Ooh, I'm on the ball.
That's gonna be
Beat that.
hard
Beat
hard
that.
to beat. All right. Oh, 16.
Not quite gonna do it, sir. All right. Well, the nice thing is we're in this dungeon together, Gene. And I'll be honest, there's no one I'd rather have at my side than you in this dungeon.
Motherfucking teamwork.
So, without further ado, this first area of the dungeon we're going to talk about is, what does it mean to be a good player? And we think the best place to start is what does it mean to be a good player from a personal standpoint? When you come to the table, what are you bringing and how are you bringing it? And that kind of thing. So, I think the first thing I want to talk about is etiquette, right? So, there's a lot of, we're going to touch on etiquette probably a few times tonight, but the first one is being on time. It's super simple. Not everyone is capable. And listen, real life issues are real life. And listen, traffic's real. Getting caught up at work is real. Like these are all totally legit. But communication is key there. But listen, you're all here to do a thing together, and being on time is sort of the easiest way you can kind of show you are a team player and that you are excited and give respect to not only your GM, who's probably put in a lot of work and time into the thing, but to your other players as well. I don't know, Gene. What do you got?
There we go. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. And to add on to that, I mean, it's so easy to shoot a text, or, if an emergency comes up, you're generally gaming with your friends, so they'll understand. Or if you're not and you're gaming at one of these, organized plays, if you have a friend in that group, you could let them know that, hey, I'm running a few minutes behind. I know some of these slots are a bit tight, but most people are pretty
Eh,
understanding.
eh, eh, tight
Slot.
slop.
um, we're definitely 5 years old. Okay. But no, and so it's like it's a general. Oh, Julia's laughing hysterically above me. Uh, but it's just a courtesy thing. It's like honestly,
Yeah.
this is just part of life. You just be nice, like be courteous to people, and that's part of the etiquette. I mean, I think the next part that I would like to really delve into is being prepared. Because if you're the guy or gal or, who shows up and you never have dice, like, your friends eventually are like, come on, buy yourself a set of dice. Or, or, or you're just borrowing all the time, and not everyone likes to share their dice. Some people have very big dice superstitions.
I mean, listen, I've met the territorial dice people. Gene, you have too. There are people who you don't touch their dice. That's just that you lose fingers if you touch the wrong people's dice. And I mean, we're exaggerating for comedic effect, but like, there is something to be said for showing up with your sheet, with your pencil, with your dice, and like again, it's just one of those other ways that you show
Also,
respect and
if you show up with a pencil, don't fucking break off the fucking tips like a fucking
whoa,
monster.
whoa, I feel attacked. I showed up to have a good time,
Listen, you hang
and I
those
feel
on your dice bag or your shirt until some fucking jackass rips off the plastic end that holds anything.
it's like a
Fucking
toy. They're meant to be
monster.
separated, right?
Monster, you goddamn monster.
You may notice that Gene does not like how I treat his pencils, but
Julia bought me a whole pack of fucking pencils
oh,
because you
I
guys are
can't wait to fuck those
fucking
up.
monsters.
I can't wait to fuck those up. Um, but yeah, so being prepared, it's not super hard. And again, it's one of those we're all in this thing together. And listen, we all have real lives, and this is a game, so you may only have 4 hours for a game, 2 hours for a game, whatever it is. So any extra time you're taking to be like, hey, can I get dice? Hey, I don't know my character. You're just taking away from the activity. And I know me. If I show up to game, like I'm here to do the thing, and it's one of those easy things. I think though this segues really nicely into reviewing your sheet, right? Again, these are there's more that we're going to talk about, but these are sort of just very easy, basic things you can do. Is hey, you may not have played this character for a month. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a weekly game or a bi-weekly game, maybe you're pretty familiar with your abilities, your items, all that stuff. But taking a minute, looking over your sheet, getting yourself mentally prepared uh, to get into character and to know what you can do in the game. It just, it just makes you a better player, which is kind of what this dungeon's all about, right, Gene?
Yeah, and to add on to that, I don't care if you don't know all the rules of whatever tabletop you're playing, but you should know at least how your character specifically works. And now, if you're new, that is completely acceptable to, not fully know it. But if you play a character, and even if it's monthly or you haven't played it in a year, you should probably figure out how your specific character works. You don't need to know how Rennie's character works. You don't need to know how anyone else's characters work. As long as you know how your character works and interacts with the environment slash rules, you'll be pretty solid. That's kind of it. Just kind of be aware and know what you can do, and then you'll figure it out how it works with everyone else.
Nice, nice. And real quick before we move on, I want to say to any new players or people who have new players in their games, you know, no one wants to look stupid at a table, right? Especially if you have someone, me or Gene, who've been gaming for 20 plus years and maybe have read the player's handbook a few dozen times because we're weird. And you know that we know all these things and da 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 da. Don't ever feel embarrassed to ask questions about how a thing works, about how your powers, spells, abilities work, because everyone at the table wants you to have a good time. And if you know how things work and how you can affect the world and the world can affect you, the better you understand it, the more you can play in that paradigm. And that's always fun. So please never, I hope that you're at a table where you feel comfortable enough to ask questions of your GM or another player. But please, please, I've seen, Gene, I'm sure you have as well, but I've seen so many times people don't ask those basic questions because they feel embarrassed or they don't want to look silly. And like, guys, before we go any further, it's a
Game.
game.
Also, I'll
It's a
tell
game.
you, for not just playing tabletop, but I recall many times where I would go to a LARP and everyone's like real tense. You're not sure it's your first time, but then you kind of like point in that direction and you see some fucking asshole in fucking elf ears. And you're like, holy fucking shit! Why do I care so much? Why am I so serious? Why am I so wound up about this? That person's wearing elf ears, and we're gonna have a great time.
Right.
Or that person's dressed in fucking ridiculous Hot Topic armor, but we're gonna have a good time. And so the whole idea is like, it might seem daunting, but once you're doing it with everyone else, and therefore it's cool amongst everyone. Like no one
Yeah,
there is going like, "Oh my god, how could you?" No, we're all there rolling dice, or we're all
yeah,
there hitting each other with plumbing equipment.
right, right. Yeah, this is all pipes and foams, guys. And listen, I don't want to speak for other people because that's not the kind of guy I am. But 9 times out of 10, gamers want to tell you about games. It's just true. You know, everyone likes to talk to themselves about themselves to one greater or lesser degree, and gamers love the idea of talking about gamecraft. Possibly one of the reasons we're here, maybe. But that being said, Gene, let's move into kind of the next part about personal responsibility of being a good player. And I'm going to kick it off with be open minded, right? So, there's a lot of crap in the real world that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And D&D, Deadlands, any tabletop, LARP, whatever the case may be, these are chances to step away from those things and to get yourself into that mindset of, all right, I'm stepping into Faerun. I'm stepping into the alternate history of the Wild West. It's sometimes, again, for some people, it's a lot easier to slip into that sort of fantasy mindset of like a new place. But for others, it's not. So, kind of taking a moment, taking a breath, and just clearing your head and sort of entering that world you're about to play in for the next few hours. Gene, what do you got?
I mean, yeah, and I think part of it is like, as Rennie said, you kind of like empty yourself of you, and then kind of think of your character. And let's be real here: when you're new to gaming, you're new to storytelling, your first character is going to be very similar to you, and that's okay. That's perfectly awesome. But they're going to be a little bit different, and maybe focus a little bit on those differences. Maybe they're a little bit more heroic. Maybe they're a little bit more brash, and that's okay. And the point is, you kind of think of your character choices like, well, if this person that I'm playing was in this situation, how would they react? And like, for me, recently when we were playing Curse of Strahd, I did some things as my character where I was like, this doesn't make sense because he was a zealot and he's always felt this like hardcore, deep, fervent push, and he started to use a lot of caution. And whether that was Gene bleeding over because he just knows the D&D rules, or if that was a roleplay decision that I didn't quite understand. And so I kind of took some time and I assessed it, and I realized that it did stem maybe a little bit from my meta of the knowledge, but a part of it was also from a very big roleplay choice that happened in a scene earlier where his essential faith got shaken because he became scared that he would lose everything that he was. And so that shaped those choices. And once he was reaffirmed, he kind of jumped back into that carefree, definitely zealot person because that's who he truly is.
Carefree zealots? Is that a common trope?
I feel like, I don't know, is it? I don't know. I carefree as in nothing can go wrong. Proceed with confidence. Yeah, and so I think that's really it. Is think of your player, like what would your character do in that situation, and you can sit there and make up situations in your head and be like, huh, I'm gonna run this scenario in my brain. I don't need rules, I don't need things, but what's the first thought that comes to mind? Much like sometimes when you take those internet tests, and it's like name the first thing you do, and then it picks what house or you know what faction you're part of, but it kind of gives you a personality description. You could also do those for your characters to kind of be like, where do they fall in to those spectrums?
Yeah, no, Gene, that's great. Um, I got nothing to add on that. The keeping your choices in mind and playing forward from choices, and I think that brings us to a good point about how you know this activity that we do, gaming in whatever game you play, Deadland. Again, I keep saying Deadlands.
It's so good.
D&D,
Such a
Deadlands,
good
and again, if
game.
you haven't played Deadlands, play Deadlands.
It's a good
Shane
game.
Lacey Hensley is going to reach out soon.
I
We're going to
mean,
be friends. It's going
and
to be
then
awesome. It's going to lead to Bruce Campbell somehow because he was part of the. Never mind. So, keeping those choices in mind and going forward is very much that sort of yes and play. So, while it may not have been in character for Charles to make certain choices, Gene sort of took those choices and then moved forward. He turned those choices into part of Charles's story and moved forward. And that sort of yes and mindset is to me is one of the biggest parts of gaming. Yes, it's very much an improv skill, uh, but you're doing a group narrative experience. You're telling a story together, and especially when you're doing this in such a collaborative way. The big thing that I always think of is never take away, always add, right? And that's kind of yes and. You don't take away from scenes. You don't try to nix what someone else has done. You build off of what other people do. You build off of what happens to you, negative or positive. um and so I guess that kind of is really a way to sum up, sort of be ready to role play. You have this sort of open mind, you're reviewing your choices, and you sort of get into that yes and mindset, and realize that it's a very symbiotic relationship you have with the people around you. And some things, everyone's got different styles when it comes to GMing, to playing, the whole nine yards. um but a big thing to remember is that your GM is another player. And yes, he's a player plus one because he's got some extra responsibilities, probably a lot more work on his part or her part. And but it's key to keep in mind this sort of symbiotic relationship. Um, yeah. So that'd be my kind of my next movement in that. Gene, you got anything for me?
yeah, I mean, uh, I agree completely with the whole relationship of just kind of going with the flow and adding and not taking away, because you don't want to bum other people out. You're all here to have fun. You're all here kind of working together, hopefully, depending on what game you're playing or people you're playing, and that's fine. But another good thing to kind of help keep things recent, because it's always a little bit, I don't know, not fun if you're constantly being like, what happened? I don't really remember everything. And so if you take notes, which is I encourage taking notes while playing games, because often you might tie in clues. Like I remember one of my first games was a superhero game in a D20 system, and my PCs like were fucking spot on everything, and then they made up this insane concept, and they were like, it was the mafia trying to take out the president. And I was like, you know what? It definitely was the mafia trying to take out the president. But they took notes and they kind of pieced things together that I didn't even piece together, and it's awesome. It
You were
really,
a storyteller in
and
that,
I
right,
was a
Gene?
storyteller in that. And so my players and just being reviewing their notes, knowing their things, enriched the story. And so as a player, if you take notes, if you write down a lot of things as your character in character, it helps refresh your mindset of that character. Because like Rennie said, you may not play that character for a month or two, a year, 2 weeks, a week, and you have so much going on in your real life that it may not be that easy for you to take to really get back into it immediately. But if you have a quick few pages of like some of the notes and you just review the last session, it can really help you be your character, get into the character, and be present for the game.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I think Gene brings up a great point when he was storytelling and he listened to his players and they came up with a story. And again, it may not have been the story that Gene had in mind, but Gene was present, right? And you're going to hear that word a lot in this little talk, because being present is so huge in this storytelling atmosphere that you've sort of entered. Because listening to others, listening to the story your GM is giving you, and keeping your character's mindset, it can be a lot. But if you're present and you're in that moment, you're gonna find those beautiful those beautiful moments where something clicks right. And I'm sure Gene's had this. I know I've had it where someone will will mention something, and then your GM might remind you of something, and things click for you, and you just, if you were present in the moment, you see the puzzle take shape. But if you weren't present or paying attention, or you were distracted with other things, you might not have gotten to that place. So just real quick before we move on to our next room, Gene, is something I like to do, and again, this is very much a Renny thing, is I like to give my characters personal goals for that session, right? So, I'll get my mindset right, think about my choices, and I'll go, you know what? This game, I'm gonna try to make a connection with Gene's character. And again, I'm not going to go out of my way and try to force it, or try to, pigeonhole it into the story. But if I see an opportunity to have an interaction with Gene that will strengthen some bond, cool, I'm going to take it. And again, it's maybe not forcing a story yourself into a story. Think about these objectives. I want to mention something from my backstory. And again, you don't need to be like, and there I was years ago in, it doesn't need to be this monologue, but it could be as simple as, oh, hey guys, I really like those baked goods. My dad used to be a baker in Sweden. Whatever. It's just a quick throwaway. And again, if other people are just like, neat, you like pastries, cool. If someone's like, wait, you're from where? Oh, and again, it's just giving yourself objectives. And again, this is me. I don't know if Gene does this, um, but it's giving yourself objectives to open up storylines. That's really all
Uh,
it is.
I recall you and I having a large shout conversation, as we do because we're both from Jersey and we shout at each other. But where you were like, Gene, you gotta mention your frog person's last name because it's so dumb. And so in Players and Creators game, my character's name is Gorple Lurky Pokey, and it just kills Rennie. And so it's like, Gene, I
Love it.
need you to mention your last name.
I,
And so the next game, I made it a personal objective to drop my fucking last clan name and just get the reaction. And so, you can do these little objectives. They don't even have to be that important.
right,
But
right. And
it,
again, we're talking sometimes about story reasons. Listen, guys, sometimes for hilarity reasons, just as important, maybe more. That's something you're gonna have to get there on your own. Um, but Gene, I think we covered this room pretty well. What do you think?
I think there's one last thing we got to talk about. And
Sure.
it's a bit more of a real life situation, which is leave your baggage at the door. Guys, life is complicated. Life can get you down. But you're going to imagination land. You're rolling dice to solve the problem. You're hitting people with foam weapons. Whatever you choose. Or you're fucking tapping enough mana to fucking throw the biggest fireball of your life at someone. And that's cool. Whatever
Also important.
whatever you're deciding. But the point is that, you know, shit happens to everyone. And if you bring that baggage to the game, unless you can use it in a constructive way to help like a scene or role play, or maybe your character's feeling something similar, there's a good chance that you could really bring that negative vibe to your table, and everyone's there to have fun. And there's a time and place, and that's cool if that's what people decide. But I find that if you're going to a table, you or a LARP or a game, just kind of tuck that away for the time you're getting to role play. And I understand if things are a little too hard, well, maybe you might need to take a little bit of time for yourself before going in, and that's cool. Or take a break. It's always okay to check in and check out, and if you need a personal pause, take it. But when you try to come to these situations as a player, you know, just try to leave that stuff outside. You got bills to pay. Who doesn't? And it's just, it's yeah, you're here to
Ain't
play with your
nothing in
friends.
this world for free.
And what's nice about some of these games, especially like D&D, if one of your friends owns a book, you don't gotta pay shit to play the game. And so, and that's kind of where you don't have to worry about those things. So, but with that said, unless Rennie, you have anything to add,
No, I think you nailed it, brother.
all right, I think we're going to be moving on to the next room, which is
Ooh,
being a good player with other players.
ooh, very important.
Rennie,
Is it that time, Gene?
it's about that time. We're gonna
Oh, it's happening.
for people joining us now. Rennie and I roll initiative to see who gets to start the subject, and in or the next room. And so, Rennie, you want to start, or you want?
Yeah, here we
Oh,
go.
oh, I'm gonna
Ooh,
fucking
not a
crush
good
it.
show.
Oh no, I have to wait 5 seconds. Ah,
-1 because you didn't wait 5 seconds, right?
I get +1 because you got the first room. Oh no! Crushed and betrayed by the Nightbot. Apparently, Rennie, you get to go first again.
Perfect, perfect. Which is hilarious because Gene can tell you when I roll initiative, I do bad. It's a thing. I do bad.
I mean, you also play clerics.
Yeah, because they're great. Um,
It's true. They
so
are so good.
being a good player with other players. Now, this is the part of the dungeon that's it's pretty meaty, and because there is some amount of personal responsibility getting to the table, but it really starts when everyone's involved, right? This is a group thing. So whenever you're dealing with other people, friends, acquaintances, people you met online, doesn't matter. The first thing that I always bring to the table is being respectful of other people's experiences, of other people's role play choices. You know, but trust me, this is a fantasy game of amateur storytelling, and I'm going to say it again, amateur. So we're not all novelists and published authors. We are a bunch of people who want to have fun rolling dice and make a story along the way. And to that end, that story can only be told if everyone has respect for everyone else at the table. Um,
I'm gonna
I think
pipe
that's a
in
good.
pretty quickly because Mama Shady asked, "Did you cover courtesy when others are speaking? Some people get overly excited about an idea and forget their manners." Actually, that's kind of part of what we're going to now with the being a good player with other players. And so, as part of being respectful, I think is how I would go into this is courtesy, being trying not to speak over people, trying to give each person their moment. If someone's doing a cool action and you know it's their thing, well, you know what? Maybe you don't need to roll a die. Maybe you might want to be like, hey, can I take the help action to support them so that they feel extra good about succeeding? And it comes down to, especially now, like dealing with the pandemic. I know this is going to be a later thing we're going to touch, but I'm going to touch it now because I think it's important, which is you got to, especially being on Discord or any other talking thing, it's hard. You're not in person, so you don't get that physical cues. So you have to be again, Rennie and I will say this forever, which you have to be extra present. You need to be paying attention to both the Discord screen, to whatever virtual screen you're doing, whatever virtual tabletop, so that everyone can take a moment and be respectful of whose turn it is or who's doing a thing. I mean, I know I did it. I jumped in recently. I forget exactly the time, but everyone gets excited. That's hopefully the point is that you want to
Oh
be
yeah,
excited, and that's okay. But being respectful and being careful because not everyone is as outgoing. Not everyone is the same, so you gotta we'll get into that a little bit more. But
right. Yeah, that's a great question, by the way, and this is exactly the place that we're going to talk about that kind of thing when you're dealing with the other people at the table. So respect and courtesy; those are your watchwords, right? Those are things to live by. Kind of rolling in what Gene already said, being present. at the table. And this is a little bit of a touchback to what I talked about earlier, is the more present you are, the more aware of the story that's happening around you and with you, which is the beautiful part, is that the story is never happening around you. It's happening with you. And the more present you are, the more you can add to that story, the more you get out of the story. And D&D, tabletopping, LARPing, any amount of group narrative play, the more you put in, the more you get out. And listen, there is just as much value in cool one-liners as meaningful pauses, or giving someone else that moment to shine, or and again, the examples are nearly endless, but presence is big at a table. And virtual, we're gonna try to touch that again. We're not super experts on that because that's a bit of a new territory
Oh
for us, but
boy, yeah.
you know we have a few games that we've been playing during quarantine, and we've learned some do's and don'ts, Gene, I would say.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so that's kind of my bit. Gene, do you want to talk a little bit about preparation, especially when it comes to
Yeah.
your turns
So
and
so
your
in
actions?
in most tabletop games, there's a form of tracking combat or actions or things that are happening. And most of the time they come in some sort of sequential order based on either rolling dice, deck of cards. It really depends on what the game is, who knows. But sometimes, I actually, not sometimes, all the time, combat is honestly the slowest thing that happens in most tabletops. Like, I could role play, me and Rennie ran 8 miles, and that took us 3 seconds to talk about. But the
Yep.
moment we fight one goblin, that takes us 30 minutes. And so, um, it comes to being where think ahead of what your character is going to do. And that can be a general concept or that can be your specific action because, again, things can change. That's kind of the nature of a randomized game and randomized dice is that actions can change. But if you have an idea in your head of what your character is going to do next, it helps the flow of the game and the combat. If like that like recently in the DM's game at Players and Creators, we were fighting these ash zombies and they were awesome. But we knew that every time we did an attack to them, if you were in 5 feet, they exploded in this dust. So when I was fighting them,
Rough.
yeah, it was rough. My dinosaur was the best. But when I was fighting them, I would just preemptively roll my saving throw if I hit, just because I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming, so I was like, I'll save some time because we'll just see how it goes, and that way I can quicken this out so that we can flow and maybe get a little bit more game in because like that's all you really want, just a little bit more game.
Right, right. Just how do you milk the gaming cow? Right, it's a cow, Gene. You milk the gaming cow.
Yes, but it's a very tiny cow. It's a
Um,
cat. It's a cat. Can you milk a
it's
cat?
a
It
cat.
it
Oh,
has
well, I don't
nipples.
want to milk the
Cats have
gaming cow.
nipples too. Can you milk a cat? I just have that question.
I don't. I don't like this analogy anymore.
Well, I made that reference to deal with it.
Thanks. But to kind of piggyback off of Gene, I mean, he's entirely right, and you're going to hear us agree a lot. So get ready for that. Um, until we don't. Um, but no, like so you can, me and Gene have played games where the whole session is just role play. It's just our GM sort of narrating our environment while we just yak and talk and interact and react and all that fun stuff. And honestly, I find personally, everyone's got their own, what they value when it comes to gaming, but I find those are just as fun for me as really rock'em sock'em combat. But again, like Gene was saying, it's all about flow and it's all about servicing your story. When you're just purely role playing, you're servicing your story in a very immediate way. You're working through emotions, you're discussing a plan of attack. You're in it, you're doing it. And combat, as much as you are representing very chaotic, violent, and fast moving action, it is the slowest part of any role playing game. And yes, there are a few exceptions out there where they've really, truncated the combat system. But for the most part, it's always the part of any game that's the slowest. And the more you can do as a player amongst other players to sort of keep that narrative moving, the more fun you're going to have. And as a GM, I know that I've many times done my best to keep things moving. And sometimes that's just kind of queuing people up. Hey, you're on deck. Sometimes it's sort of making sure, oh, do you have any actions left? I know you have your bonus. It's just sort of keeping the narrative flowing because it keeps people attention. Because listen, as much as we talk about being present, it's not always easy. Listen, if you're in a combat of six PCs and 10 monsters, you could have a lot of time between turns, about between things happening. Now, granted, being present and paying attention during other people's turns is definitely in that respect bubble. Um, but it can be hard. So doing anything you can to milk the fuck your cat, to milk the cow of gaming, is just going to make the experience better. And a lot of that comes down to, I think it boils down to support, being supportive of people around you, being supportive of their choices during role play. And again, these are kind of oddly connected ideas, but they live in the same house, so to speak. Um, Being supportive of just never nixing someone or telling someone what they should do. That's not how this group narrative storytelling works. It's all about, oh, you made this choice, okay, we've established that is true. How do we build off of that? Where do we go with that from there? And again, a lot of that comes down to supporting the people around you, and with that respect and the kindness and courteous, you are building a foundation for people to make choices, make bold choices, make not so bold, whatever choice they would make. The more you keep these things in mind, again, listen, I mean, again, me and Gene to tell you story after story about how we made choices for our characters that weren't like the best choice for our character, but it made sense in the moment, in the scene, and we knew that we had the support of the people around us to be able to make those choices.
And to kind of like piggyback on that, which is when I took an acting class, one of the biggest phrases that my teacher taught me, he was such a fabulous man, was you're only as good as you give. And so the idea is what your partner gives you, you give them excellence, and then therefore that you will boost each other. And so it's you put in good, and out comes, and good comes, like you're putting out this goodness and good's coming in. So if I'm helping a scene move along, and then Rennie's also firing back in that moment, it builds a better moment. And so if you're supportive and sending out that energy and that role play, it will encourage your partner or scene partner or other players to give that back to you. And that is honestly literally one of the most basic acting things, but it applies so much in tabletop gaming, LARPing, because it's all just a little bit of improv with some random probability. And so it really does pay off. Like I took this class and I became a better role player. And these kind of, I don't know, these fucking quotes or things like anecdotes are good to help improve you. But let's move on.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit
Oh,
about.
okay.
Sorry, I was like, I don't know.
That's okay.
I was rambling. I had to stop rambling.
That's fine. I was going to say, Gene, I think the point is it's super rewarding too, right? If you put in really good and you get really good, again, I'm not going to say that there's this higher state of story and role play. I'm not going to get, crystal philosophy on you, but when you're in that sort of present state and you're giving and taking and you're sort of passing it back and forth, it's really rewarding. You know, it's really rewarding in role play, and you can go some really interesting places and tell some really interesting stories, and that's kind of what we're here for, right? Um, but no, let's move on. Very hard cut to the
Listen,
next
you keep
room.
winning in it. No, well, it's not the next room. It's just more in this room, and this is a
Well, I mean, this is a big room.
it's a
Let's be
very
honest. It's a
very large
it's a
room.
big room. You want to start this one off, Gene, since
Yeah,
I kicked your ass in initiative?
dude, it's like twice in a row. If you get this third one, I don't even know what I'm gonna do. All right. So, um, this kind of goes into interactions, and this goes to the idea of you can offer to help people. You might be more knowledgeable of the rules. You might have a very good grasp of how the game plays, but you can offer to help. But you should never impose help. There might be new players who have questions, and that's cool for them to question and ask for your help. But you shouldn't be the one imposing your opinion about what they should or shouldn't do. I might understand your character better than you do because I know the rules better, but it's not my job to play your character. It's your job. And so I know that sometimes in my head I listen to some like D&D podcast and I get frustrated because they don't know how to play their characters, and that's okay. But it's their characters, so I can't be that
Gene,
mad.
you're like your eyes twitching out a little bit. Are you
Yeah,
gonna
it's
you gonna be all
fine.
right?
It's fine. It's fine. But everyone's their own player, and so you know your stuff. You shouldn't impose help, but if someone asks for help, you should definitely be there too if you know what's going on. And yeah, that does tie into something later, but we'll get into that later.
Well, right, and you're gonna notice that we're introducing concepts and we're just sort of rolling forward with them. And again, this all just comes back to courtesy and kindness and respect. And like, listen, I think maybe you should have cast the fireball on the 10 goblins, but you cast confusion, which is still a great spell. But regardless, whatever, it doesn't matter. Those were the choices you made in that moment. And my job as being a supportive player is to build off of whatever you presented. Um, and just a quick add-on to that before we move forward is, listen, a lot of times new players, when they do have questions, and I know I briefly talked about this, there is this sense of people at the table, everyone wants to help, right? And again, I think a lot of times it comes from a good place, but a lot of times when someone's like, hey, how does magic missile work, and four people want to tell you about how magic missile works, and let me tell you, I don't think there's any circumstance that exists where four people telling you how to do something at once is an effective way to communicate. So I'm going to say a lot of times, but what I have always found helping is let your GM answer those. And listen, you might know the magic missile fucking spell backwards and forwards, absolutely. But I find that, listen, even if I do, my job as a player is not here to tell you to do it. Now, if you look at me and say, hey, Ren, do you know how? Sure, I will give you the information you've requested. But when we're all at the table and you're sort of posing it to the world or whatever, your GM is kind of there to help with that, right? And we talked about yes and a lot, and we're probably going to talk about it again. But interacting with other people, again, it all avalanches off of courteousness, kindness, respect, and yes and is just a storytelling tool, especially because D&D, it's one of those unique D&D all tabletop LARP experiences. It's one of those unique formats you get to have improv role play and to affect story in real time. And you know when you do improv maybe outside of gaming, it's for comedic effect, right? Improv storytelling is there for comedic effect, and you're always moving towards the joke or moving into the funny bit you find when you're improving. But in D&D, you kind of get to do it all. You improv the story you're telling, you improv the comedy stuff, the serious stuff, the emotional stuff. And yes and is besides all the other watchwords to keep in mind, I feel like it is one of your strongest tools. And again, you don't need to add to every scene. And I think Gene touched on this very well not that long ago. But sometimes let someone have their moment, and your yes and is being present, and just watching and listening. And maybe after the scene is done, you go, "Wow, that was really great." Person's character's name, and that's all it is. You sort of give them a little bit of validation of, hey, that character choice you just made, it was cool, and listen, just like building people up and giving people a foundation to role play off of, validation is important too, because we're amateurs, all of us. There are very few people blessed in this world to get paid to play D&D, but there's very few out there. One day. Um, but it's one of those things that you just have to keep in mind.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, where it's like the yes and thing, but it's like if you don't have anything, it's okay to be quiet in a scene. Let that person have it. But if you do have something that can add or build, awesome. Just don't take away. Like if someone's like talking about their home and you're like, I go explore the woods, like that's not helping. That's kind of trying to take away and give them their moment. Let them talk for 5 minutes. Let them have their scene. And be patient and quiet because they were patient and quiet while you were doing something else as well. And so that kind of goes with the respect side of it. Of just like, it's be nice. Come on. It's hard.
Yeah. Don't be a dick. Will Wheaton, he kind of said it best, and I mean, there's not really improving a lot on that. Don't be a dick is a lot of what this comes down to. I mean, yes, building a foundation, building comfort. Yes, there's a lot of that too. But don't be a dick. And I mean, Gene mentioned this recently, so I don't think we need to go into it too hard. Don't play other people's characters. Listen, it doesn't matter how much you know the rules. Doesn't matter. Hey, I just finished playing a level 20 wizard. I know all the wizard stuff. Oh, I played the exact subclass that you're playing. Doesn't matter. They're not you. They're not that character. Let them do what they want to do. So I don't think we're gonna hark on that too hard. Gene knocked it out of the park. But there is another area in interacting with people around you that I'd like to kind of get into, and it's about being aware of the group dynamics. Um, and part of that is this one's a little multifaceted. Every group is going to be different. Me and Gene are involved in a few games literally right now, and the group dynamics in each of those games is different. And it's maybe not radically different. Some cases it is, but it's different case to case to case. Um, but being aware of sort of what kind of stories people are trying to tell. And I mean, again, that's a little bit on the ephemeral philosophy side, but there's also, be aware of the group dynamic of like, don't let the wizard go in the front. And, it may seem simple to people who've played the game, but there is something to be said to be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of your group and playing to those strengths and not necessarily highlighting those weaknesses, but finding ways to overcome those weaknesses as a group. And I'll tell you, there is no better thing that okay, there's a lot you can do, but it's always great whenever you remember something about someone else's character and like, okay, so you're a party of half elves and dwarves, and you got your one human guy. He's just your one human, your token human in the group. And the half elf is like, oh, but I cast light because I know Tommy the paladin can't see in the dark. And again, it'll take you 4 seconds to say, but Tommy the paladin, he feels really good because you thought of him, you included him in your action. It's just one of those great role play. And again, it takes very little effort to bring someone, and again, it is a weakness of his character, but you turned it into a story opportunity. May not be this epic tale of you lit a torch, but it's still cool. um, what do you got, Gina?
To add on that, we got Mama Shady also talking about being aware of the person in real life, and that kind of goes, I think, hand in hand with group dynamic. Because as we were saying before, not only in character, but a little bit of out of character, where some people, like Rennie and I, we're very outspoken. We're very loud. We can occasionally talk over people, not trying to, or not, trying to make their game worse. But there are some people, like I have a really good friend who plays in my current D&D game I'm running, and he plays a quiet character. But when he does stuff, it has more importance. Or when he actually talks, like, it has a little bit of gravitas, and that's just his personality. He's just a very quiet guy, but that's okay. And so you, as a friend slash player, you may not get this every time you go to an organized play, but if you're playing with a group of friends or people you can generally assess, the quiet person, the person who talks a lot. And if you're the person who talks a lot, well, maybe sometimes you got to hit a few of those curveballs to your quiet friend. To be like, even if they're not going to say much, might be like, this conundrum happened. I'd like to get your opinion on it. So you give them a moment, you pass them the opportunity, and if they take it, awesome. If they don't, you continue role playing with everyone else, and they will pipe in when they need to. But the point is, and also that's where you as a player, this is where you can kind of do a little bit of good knowing another person's character. So if I know Quiet McQuieton is our party's ranger, yeah, that's the name I
That's
just
my
named.
next character, by the way. Quiet
I
McQuieton.
don't believe you could play that character.
I played a mute vampire once. Fuck you.
Sure you did. Anyway, um, yeah, but you talk with your hands just as loudly as you talk with your mouth.
Do you remember my sign language was
Yeah,
pointing?
you did the creepy people eating hand jive from Ravenous. Anyway, but the whole point was, if I know your character, I know you're playing the ranger, I know you're good at outdoor stuff. That's when, as my character, I'd be like, huh, we're going down this path. I'm not sure if it's treacherous. Hey, Quiet McQuiet guy, could you check this out for us? Let us know what's going on. And then that way you can get them involved, really using their strength to kind of boost them up. Because maybe they're quiet because they're afraid of failing. And so, and that's okay. But if you can help, push that narration to be like, do that thing you're really good at that you're likely not going to fail at. And that's a nice way to help boost them up and make them that focus for that moment if they're not comfortable being that main center of attention. And I think that's just a responsibility of a person, players who are more outspoken than other players, having the respect to know when to give the time to every
Right. That's
person.
awareness of group dynamics. Yeah. Gene, if I can kind of roll off that, I'm going to jump ahead a
Oh,
little
yeah,
bit
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
I think you brought up something really important. That there is an out of game element to every game, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong or lying to you. These are my opinions. They also are true. But
Super true.
there is always an out of game element to game. And what Gene's talking about, there's different people from different walks of life, is that it's all about inclusion, right? It doesn't matter what your gender is, what your sexual proclivity is, what your age is, what your able level is. It doesn't matter, and that's one of the beautiful parts about this hobby that we all play, is that anyone can be part of it, right? And like Gene's saying, there's going to be people with different experiences, different, different, modes of being in real life or otherwise. Or, like I said, I did play a mute vampire once. It was fine. But beyond that, this game is meant for everyone. And you as a player interacting with others is to recognize that, and to, again, with that respect and the kindness and the courteous, you never want to not include people who want to be part of this thing, because it's honestly one of the best hobbies out there. I mean, again, me and Gene have been doing it since we were literal toddlers. um but we maybe have a skewed view on it, but telling stories is in our DNA, and everyone wants to be a part of a story. And don't get me wrong, sometimes those stories are about fighting dragons and saving princesses. Sometimes those stories are about how did you walk this road that was 100 miles? Like, it doesn't. Everyone should be able to be included, and your one of your responsibilities as a player with the other players is to never feel to make someone feel ostracized or not part of that group or that story. So yeah, sorry, Gene, I wanted to kick ahead, but you brought up a really good point, and I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of it. So I guess I'll put us back on track and say, I guess kind of in line with what I was just saying, it's about collaboration. And that collaboration isn't possible if you are ostracizing people, if you are not creating that atmosphere that is comfortable, that is respectful, that is kind. I mean, because listen, I'll tell you, as far as kind goes, a lot of these are out of character traits that you need to bring to your character. Because listen, there's been games where me and Gene have sat across the table and have cursed each other's, mothers, and we've gone at each other's throats, but we do it in such a way that it's accessible, and me and Gene are never being unkind or disrespectful to one another. We're keeping it as our characters. Um, and I mean, very recently, me and Gene play a game where a character came in, and he was very, my authority is right. My position gives me certain respect. I played a character who is, shall we say, a rebel, doesn't really respect other people's authority, and so we clashed a lot, like a lot. And again, we had some really powerful emotional scenes. We had some really head to head scenes, but we checked in out of game. We made sure we knew what kind of story we were telling together. Um, and, we collaborated. And listen, there is nothing wrong with checking in with other players if you are entering territory that you're not sure if someone is comfortable with. And again, I know, Gene, that is stuff we want to talk about down the line, but I think this is a good place to just sort of mention it. Is that with collaboration, there's sort of, again, there's always this out of character element, and part of that is checking in with people. Um, and I can't tell you how many times that people have approached me, I've approached them about, hey, are you comfortable if we do this kind of scene? And either I'll say, yeah, let's rock, or hey, you know what? That's not really what I'm interested in. And again, because we are being respectful of one another, I respect their decision and they respect mine. And we make a story that fits both of our comfort levels, and that's very important.
To kind of tag on, I think a big thing about the storytelling and collaborating is making mistakes. You make mistakes in life, and that's how you grow. And you make mistakes in role playing games, and that's how your characters grow. If you succeeded or won everything you did as your character, well, what's the reason to be a hero? What's the challenge? What's your call to action? And, like, you can look at things like Lord of the Rings, how they bumble and fail and.
I mean, dude, that whole scene when Pippin knocks a suit of armor down a well and it summons a lot of goblins and orcs and trolls, like Pippin messed up, but it led to a really cool story in in that location. So please continue. I just
Yeah, no, and it comes down to the idea of conflict. You generally, it's like when you're thinking of role playing games, especially if you're playing with a group of friends, you're doing a lot of PVE, which is players versus everyone. So you're kind of playing against the monsters and bad guys of the world, and you're also playing against the politicians and the good people because they may not be aligned exactly as you are. And so having some of those conflicts, what happens if you guys are freedom fighters and you don't agree with the king's laws because they're too harsh, or you are, or you're a group of thieves and you guys are just criminals, and that's okay because that's the group you decide to play. But as long as everyone's okay with that, but having that conflict, having that that story conflict is good. It helps build your characters. It helps strengthen you. As long as you guys have a drive, it keeps the story going. So, don't be afraid to make mistakes. You know what? That natural one can turn into a huge scene, like you said, kicking a fucking thing down a well.
Yeah.
And also, honestly, and this kind of comes, I'm going to take this a little. Murder Hobos was just written by Mama Shady. And you know what? I'm going to tell you an old story about me and Rennie. So, back when we were
Uh-oh.
kids and we were playing Sir Garth the Strong, and Rennie was.
Ralphard the Wizard.
That's how you knew he was a wizard, because his last name was the Wizard.
Yeah.
Um,
Duh.
we,
And the hat. I had a hat.
yeah, you did have a hat, and I definitely my last name was the Strong, so we know how this works. Clearly, we did well, but
We were very advanced for our age.
yep. So we went on these heroic journeys and missions and fights and met this weird ice skating king, and it was great. Except this one time, this guy rushed up on us when we were on the top of a hill. And Rennie, as Ralphard, fucking blew him away with a fucking fireball. Because we didn't know. We just, we were like, fuck it, kill him. Sky charging at us. And then it turned out that that guy had like a note to help a kingdom, and we definitely just murdered a messenger.
Yep.
And so that was a failure that we had to kind of make atone for as our characters. We had to, deal with this guy's family. We had to deal with the kingdom we technically just attacked. And it was a whole big thing. I can't honestly remember what happened the afterwards, but I do remember that moment where we learned a lesson because we made a huge mistake. And that taught us a moral lesson of like, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't, assess what's going to go on before, just murder hoboing.
Yeah. 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 I didn't know what story you were going to come out with, and I'm really happy that was the story. Um, yeah. Yeah. And again, I think kind of when you sign up to game or sign up to play any tabletop, you've signed up for conflict, whatever form that takes. A lot of time represented by combat. Shocker. It's not like most of the game is geared towards combat rules or anything. But conflict can take many forms, and I'm not going to sit here and explain conflict. But the point is sometimes in conflict you fail, and you know sort of when you fail, I think an important part of is failing with grace, or kind of being a good sport about things. Because like, listen, recently in a game that I'm running, I dropped Gene like a bad hat. Like they were fighting giants, and they didn't know about the secret second giant that showed up. Gene found out really quickly about the second giant that showed up, and I put him right in the dirt. I hit him twice. They're low level, and I just put him in the dirt. But Gene was a really great sport about it. He was playing along, and him and the Bard had some back and forth, but it was, you know, so often, not so often, but there are certain cases where you can see people kind of get really disheartened by bad rolls, or oh, I went down, and they get kind of shitty about it. And I guess one of your responsibilities of interacting with other people is like, listen, there is a story in failure. There is a story in conflict has consequences. And part of what you're doing here, part of the reason you are a group of people, is you are overcoming conflict. And sometimes that conflict is your buddy just got dropped by a giant. Sometimes that conflict is you are, expelled from a kingdom and excommunicated from this nation because you're rebel fighters, or whatever the case may be. But being a good sport about failure, and again, the more you do it, and the more you kind of have this sort of out of character view on the in character things. And I know it sounds weird, but seeing failure as an opportunity for better, greater story is awesome. Another part of that too is don't fucking cheat. Just don't. I mean, and I know it's easy just to be like, well, who would cheat at a role playing game? You'd be surprised. Sometimes there's people who, if their character is powerful and doing well and always hits and 3-round burst to the head, it can really see, they don't want to fail at the table, even though, that's interesting in its own right. But, it's about storytelling. And sometimes the dice are there to tell a story just as much as you are, because part of this game is a random dice outcome. So some days you're going to go into a fight and roll 17s and higher. And that day, your character was ready to rumble. You are throwing fire, you are stabbing orcs, you're a force to be reckoned with. Then another day, when you can't roll above a five, that day, maybe something was weighing on your mind. Maybe something's going on in your character. And listen, I'm not saying every time you fail, think of a story of why you're failing, but being present and aware of those moments can kind of lead to, maybe you come out of a combat that you were a ham sandwich. You just ham sandwiched everywhere you went, didn't succeed. And maybe you come out of that combat and you're like, oh, the king struck us out of the nation, and my mother still lives in the province, and it's been weighing on me. And again, maybe not a lot comes from it, maybe it's not this massive scene, but like, it's the dice can help you shepherd you into other stories. So yeah, that's my bit about fairness and being a good sport, and don't just please don't cheat. And if you feel like you have to cheat, find something else to do.
Yeah, we
Just
we definitely had a really fun game we used to play, and then literally one of the characters, who was our friend, cheated and cheated blatantly to the GM, and the GM kind of kicked him out of the game, and then we kind of stopped playing the game, and kind of just leaves a bad taste, you know. We're all playing a game. It doesn't matter if you roll a natural. Well, it does. Everyone's happy when you roll a natural 20, but when you roll a natural one, it sucks too. But like, it's a game. And if you forget that, you might want to take a moment to think back that we're here to have fun. And if winning is all you want to do, maybe that's not the game for you, because you don't really win role playing games.
yeah, you have experiences, but you don't necessarily win.
Yeah, there's no like finish line that's like, all right, this is how I do it.
We did it. We get to yeah, yeah. There's no scoreboard. No one's keeping track. The points are all made up. Your characters are made up. Everything's made up.
Literally.
All right. So I think I'm going to move into Gene. Do you want to talk about this to stay in character and minimize out of character stuff?
I mean, yeah, we can touch on it very quickly.
Sure.
So I think a little bit. So it's okay to have table talk. You have a rapport with your friends or this group of strangers that you're about to play an adventure with, and so you kind of want to get to know them a little bit, and that's cool. But when you are, when the GM is describing a scene, when someone's role playing with you, you need to stay in character. It's a big thing to help keep them present, to keep everyone involved, to know that the storyteller know you're paying attention. And so it's like, because sometimes I know that there are some GMs that if I say something to Rennie, it's assumed I said that publicly in character. And there are some GMs who are a lot more leeway, and that's fine. But if you kind of keep out of character chatter about, I'm going to Disney World next week, well, maybe you don't need to say that at the table you're about to sit down with. Or, it's like keep the game at the game and have fun at it. And so keep it just a little bit, to a minimum. Unless, and there's difference. Now, every table might be different. Like, I know we have a lot of inside jokes at our tables, and that's cool. But there are some times when someone's saying something so out of character that it just takes away from everyone. Where, like, as a GM, I'm trying to get the attention of everyone, but this person keeps talking and talking about this out of character thing that is not, I guess, wasting everyone's time a little bit, because we're all trying to. We only have so many hours to play this game. We only have so much time, and you know, it takes a little bit of effort to.
Gene, can I tell you what I do? Because
Yeah,
you know what I do.
yeah.
I like, right. So I take this role play thing to another level because I'm a whack job. But every character I play has a different voice than mine. Doesn't matter what they are. I have a Triton character from Under the Ocean has a Russian accent. Don't ask me why. I decided Under the Water is Russia. Um, in Curse of Strahd, you hear my shitty British accent. Um, in another game that me and Gene are in, I have a character who just drops his register way down low. And again, it's one of those things that it's a tool that helps me as a player sort of get into the mindset of that character, right? It's just sort of an acting role play kind of tool of just I talk like them, I find their voice, their physicality, their and it just helps me kind of build and build and build. But the beautiful part is if I'm talking like this, I'm talking in character. But if I'm talking like this and I'm saying, Gene, to get the pizza, I'm talking out of character. Um, and so again, not everyone does voices, and I'm not saying to do a voice. Listen, it's fun. You should try, but it's certainly an optional, have fun with it kind of thing. But I have found personally that giving your character a voice helps you in a number of ways, but it also really helps that divide between in and out of character. So, something to consider.
No, I think that's a good point. And not everyone can do voices because I know like I do an accent and then like halfway through doing that accent it's gone. It just goes flat. Renny has called me on that so many times. I'm like, fuck you.
So many times,
I get tired. I stop being able to play myself. It's fine.
dude. It was so funny when you played a Celtic character, and you have a decent Irish brogue. It's not bad. It's not great. But like you were fine. But they were just hit a point. You were like, nah, we're done with that. Like I'm out.
Just gotta bail.
And I like to give Gene shit because I don't lose my accent. Anyway, Gene talked about this a little bit, but kind of one of the last things we're going to talk about before we move into a sort of a different area of this is about playing to lift. And Gene had a great example when you're dealing with Quiet McQuietson, and I still have to meet this person because they're not real, and they're not real, but there's people like that out there. And but playing to lift is doing exactly what Gene is saying, is making decisions or including people in your actions or in your role play, or because listen, sometimes, like I was saying earlier, keeping your presence and your awareness is difficult if you're not directly involved in a scene. Listen, we all have cell phones. We know what they do to our distraction and our awareness. And there he goes, and he's gone. But playing to lift, you're including people. You are lifting them up in the scene, and not only are you being a part of it, but you are highlighting some aspect of them, some feature of theirs. So I wouldn't consider this sort of a responsibility of you as a player, but it's one of those. It's the hallmark of being a good player when you lift those up around you, when they have a better time or experience because you made an effort to do that.
All right. So I think you wanted me to cover this part a little bit, as this is our new field and subject.
Yeah. This is the one that we're like, this is some stuff we figured out.
Yeah,
Maybe it'll help you.
yeah. So this kind of ties all together with being a good player with other players. So this is being a good player in a virtual setting, in a tabletop setting, and also a live setting. So it's all kind of mixing it all up. So the virtual setting. We talked about this a little bit, and we'll just talk a little bit more. It is so much more imperative that you focus. You have so many easy distractions when you're sitting at your computer. You got multiple screens, maybe. You have Facebook open on one page. You have YouTube. You're falling asleep. Anyway,
Shots fired.
shots
Shots
fired.
fired.
So it's a little bit on you as the player. You got to make yourself extra present, and you got to make sure you're not dicking around on your phone. You're not watching Facebook or YouTube and other videos, because it's a little disrespectful to A, the players, and B, the person trying to tell your story. And so and you got to be extra careful when you're trying to watch the cues of other players role playing because you're on Discord. So if I start talking and then Rennie starts talking, no one understands either of us. And it's easier in person, but it's hard when you're across, a screen from each other.
Right,
So
right. And I mean, Gene brings up a great point, but when we were live, huh, those days are coming again. They're I can see them in my mind. They're perfect and sunny and like cupcakes are there. I don't know why, but it's beautiful. Um but like when you're in physical space, there are social cues, physical cues. And listen, if like two characters are having a conversation with an NPC and the GM, and these three people are kind of like they're very intently doing something, you can kind of have some crosstalk with other players or whatever, in character, out of character, whatever the case may be. But like that does not exist in virtual, and it's hard, because it puts a lot more onus on your dungeon master or your GM or your storyteller, because they gotta fill time. There's a lot more they have to do on their end because maybe they need to pause to just look up this rule that might be very pertinent for the next scene, or oh, I wrote the name of this guy and what was it? And these natural pauses that when you're at a table, you're like, yeah, man, fucking go ahead. Like, I'm gonna talk to Gene about that thing that we were talking about, and whatever. Um, but that does not like it doesn't exist in virtual, and it's hard. It's hard. It definitely giving people their room to talk, to act, to role play is that much more important because you don't have these physical space comforts, amenities, whatever you want to call them. Um,
I think
you look
it's
like you got something for
no.
me,
I
dude.
think I think it's just like those social cues that it's a much easier to like. You pick up on those subtleties when you're in person, just as another human interacting with other humans, and
Right.
so with a screen blocking your vision, you're only seeing their upper chest. Like you don't get all the or Rennie's neck and head. Like you don't get it. No nipples. That's the first rule. No nips. No nips. Or
At least I'm
feet.
not peeing in a bottle.
Shut up. Trucker bomb, you monster. All right. Why don't you get on the next fucking part of this?
All right. Well, real quick, just to kind of put that summed up. It's about being extra present, extra aware, and like everything that you normally do at a table, you just kind of double it up. Extra kindness, extra respect, err on the side of caution, you know, stuff like that. The next part is about live action, which Gene has a lot of experience in. I have a fair amount. Um, but there's this sort of thing that we talk about when we talk about live action role play, and it's called the 10-foot rule. And essentially, it's if you're going to start a scene or you're interested in doing something, look within 10 feet of you, right, and get those people involved somehow. Doesn't matter what it is. Be creative, be mundane, like, hey man, could you get me a drink from the bar? Like, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's just this sort of rule of whenever you're impacting the world or doing something, keep people involved. Um, and that's kind of one of the beauties of this group storytelling we do is you don't know the perceptions of someone around you. You don't know what they're going to bring to the table or bring to the scene, and you will often, and I'm sure Gene can attest to this, you will often be surprised by the kind of things you didn't think of, off the wall reactions that happen because you include people in these scenes. Um, and I mean, listen, LARP is its own animal in some ways, but there's a lot of crossover with the kinds of things we've been talking about. But inclusion is huge in LARP. And listen, I've made some great friends from LARPing. Gene has made a pile of really good friends from LARPing, and that's kind of one of these things about this hobby that we haven't really talked about yet. But like these stories that we make, these experiences that we have, we come back to them, we talk about them. Maybe not all us nerds are into sports, some are, and I don't cast judgment if you are. But these are, hey, they threw a touchdown from 90 yards away. Like these cool LARP experiences, cool tabletop experiences. Those are our, dude, you were at 2 hit points and you got the killing blow on that orc commander, and that dude was about to kill the wizard. And like those are our holy crap, wasn't that cool moments. But as opposed to watching someone did it, we did it. Like we did it. Um, and yeah, it was dice and pieces of paper and maybe little miniatures, but if we were present, we were aware, we let our imagination kind of flow into that scene. You were there to some greater or lesser degree. Like you were there when you read a book and a character did something exciting in a book. You were there to some greater or lesser degree. It's that similar feeling. Um, I don't know, Gene. You're the LARP master here.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's, any story and anything, if it evokes emotion, and honestly, these live action games you're doing it, it's mostly social. So opposed to having 6 people as the main character, you have 40 or 100, and each of them has their own part to play. If I want to play Mr. Blacksmith and that's my character and I'm generic guy, that's okay. Maybe I don't have maybe my main story is making a horseshoe, and that's an okay thing. But if McKnight wants, horseshoes, you're not the goddamn most important person in this story. When the town needs to have swords or items forged, well, craftsman, guess what? That's you. And so now that knight can go beat that dragon's butt, and great. And that's awesome because you now just improved each other's story. And so that's part of the rule is like getting people involved. Like, you know what? Let's say I'm this, I play this epic character that all the older players know me, but there's this new fucking smith in town or new craftsman, and I go to him and I go, I need you to sharpen my sword. And so
My S word.
my S word with my hair perfectly coiffed for war. Um,
Perfect.
uh, and so the idea is including people and getting those new people involved, especially if you have the experience and you have the clout in character, giving those other people those moments and being part of their story. So what happens if that blacksmith helps you, and then one day he's like, I got to do this thing, but I don't know if I really want to fight. You're like, well, I'm here to help you, sir. And then so now you go adventure with him and you help him out, and maybe that builds him or her's confidence to then become an adventurer like you. And so now you've created this moment that was awesome, and
Yeah.
everyone involved had a fun time. And
Yeah.
so I think that really helps piggyback onto. I like saying. Apparently, we say piggyback all the time. Like drink everything.
I feel like we've piggybacked on a piggyback on a piggyback
All
about
right,
14 times.
we're gonna move over to. I guess really one of the most important things that just in life, but it's gonna happen, which is don't be an asshole. Literally, just don't be an asshole. Don't take away from other people's scenes. Don't be selfish. And remember that while you might be like, well, my character does that. Well, guess what? You're the person making the character choices.
Oh, good God. That shit, it
So,
enrages me
so
whenever I. Oh, go ahead, Gene.
yeah, it's okay to play a bad guy character. There's nothing wrong with it, as long as you don't do it in an out of character assholish way. So, like, let's say my character's gonna be abrasive. Well, I should probably check in with those people that I'm about to be mean to. And yes, some people will consider that taking away from the game and the immersive experience. But in the end, we're people playing a game. And also, you can always do subtle check ins where, like, I'm about to be an asshole to Rennie's character. I'd be like, if you push back on me, this is going to escalate. And so now Rennie just got an out of character cue that if he wants to push back, I'm down for it. But then this situation's going to escalate.
Right.
And he could also just be like, nah, man, I don't really want any trouble. And now I know in character, well, now my asshole character can be like, I won that conversation, and I move on, and I go, do it. But you can give these cues to people in and out of character with check ins. Like, you want to push me? Well, you push me. It ain't going to end well for any one of us. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, now you know this is going to escalate to violence, if that's going to happen. And so you can have these, you can do these choices. You can play these bad characters, bad evil characters without being an asshole about it. As long as you get ways to check in with people on an
Right.
out of character level. And some people, you know what? That's not the game they want to play. They don't want to fight other characters. They don't want to steal from other characters. They want to do whatever they want, and that's okay. But there are plenty of players who want to play. Like, if I'm playing a sheriff, I imagine that character. I would check in, obviously, but I would imagine that character wants some role play with criminals, whether catching them or turning them or, you know, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, checking in with people is super easy, doesn't take a lot of time, and being respectful of those choices is kind of big. Um, and I guess my last part before we go into our final-ish room, um, is so I talk about this sort of view from having an out of character view on your in character self, and really it's about removing your ego from the ego of the person you're playing and realizing that person A isn't real. B, you know, they don't need to go home and feel good about themselves. When you're done playing, that person goes in your mental shelf. And the point I'm kind of getting at here is that that person doesn't need to have the highlight, and what Gene is saying about including people, like that person's ego, that imaginary ego, doesn't need to be fed. So the more you work with others and aren't a dick about it, key thing, the better it can be. Yeah. So Gene, do you want to get your ass whooped in initiative round three?
Yeah, you know what? But I'm gonna fucking roll first this time.
Oh, you think that's gonna save you?
Nope. But I'm doing it. Ooh, ooh,
Oh
ooh,
shit! I'm in
ooh,
trouble. I'm in
ooh.
trouble. I'm
Uh,
in trouble.
oh my fucking god!
Bow down, bitch.
apparently you're the fucking king of this dungeon so far.
Apparently. Well, I don't know if I'm the king of it. I'm definitely I'm first through the door. Whether I get hit in the face with the trap,
Well, I
but
mean, you
first
shaved
through.
your head to the mohawk, so we can only assume you're playing the barbarian for this dungeon. And I got
Yeah.
my yes Raven Queen shirt on, so I guess I'm the
I mean, I've
cleric.
had a mohawk for like a year. It's my cleric
Dwarf.
hawk. Anyway, so one of the last bits we're gonna kind of dive into, and again, we've sort of built this sort of foundation of what we've been talking about, and we're just kind of funneling it deeper and deeper. And then now we're kind of hitting this point of what does it mean to be a good player with your storyteller? Because we've talked about what it means for you to be a good player when you come to the table. What does it mean to be a good player when other players are around? But what does it mean to be a good player with your storyteller? Because your relationship, as it can be coined, is slightly different when it comes to that. And there are some good tips and tricks and just ways of thinking that can be helpful in that area. And I think the first one that we got to hit, Gene, is about trusting your GM and having faith in the story they're trying to tell. And listen, there's different GM styles, there's different play styles, because I guarantee you the way me and Gene play is not the same way you play at your table. And that's great. That's fine. Some of the most fun is when those diverse play styles and ideologies kind of come together. Um, but a lot of times, or sometimes, you see that there's this sort of us versus them kind of mentality with GMing. That the GM is sort of this combative element, because they run the monsters and they run sort of the things that are trying to kill you a lot of times. But this sort of trusting your GM, kind of looking at your GM as kind of another player in the game, um, but having faith in the story they're trying to tell. And like, listen, if you failed all your roles and you guys ended up in jail, well, having faith and again being a good sport and not just being like, oh, I guess we go to jail. Fine. Well, I guess all my stuff's gone, right? Like, again, that's being a good sport and playing along, but having faith in the story of like, all right, mates. Well, looks like we're in quite a pickle this time. And just kind of having faith and playing along with the scenario you've been put in, because nine times out of 10, I can't speak for every single time and every single GM, your GM's got a plan. Your GM's like, okay, they messed up here and here, and that's going to send them to jail, but that jail's actually connected to a dungeon, and that's going to work into the story, and so the big one, and we're going to go into other points here, but the big one is faith and trust. Because your GM, he or she wants to have fun too. And if you're arguing and you're fighting and and just like and you don't have faith in the story they're telling, they're not going to have a good time. You're probably not having the best time. So that's a quality, and I think Gene can agree with me here, that is important for a player and a storyteller to have.
And yeah, I mean, that also goes hand, like, you might want to be like, you might know the rules so well that you're like, oh, shut up. Anyway, but you know how something works, but your GM goes, no, this is how it works. You know what? Guess what? Respect your GM rulings. Because it might work one way for one GM, it might work one way for another GM, but in the end, the storyteller or GM, essentially the rules are guidelines, and they are there to facilitate. And so in
It's
one,
all made up. It doesn't matter.
so if your GM rules something in the moment, cool, great, go with it. Don't argue because you're just going to slow things down, bog things up, and it's just not going to be enjoyable because you're all arguing at a table where you could be doing more fun things. And now, if you truly have a problem, you could talk to the GM afterwards to be like, hey, I think the rule goes like this, and then go, oh, I thank you for your opinion, but fuck off. Or, it's, well, probably not that way. But they can be like, cool, I'll look into it, or not.
How respectful and kind of you, Gene. No,
Get,
that's just what Gene says to me
yeah, I
whenever
was
I
like,
talk to Gene about it.
get
That's what he
fucked.
tells me.
Get fucked.
Um, no, but that's. I think Gene hit the nail on the head with that. And there's different GM styles. I know Gene. Not that Gene is a slave to the rules or anything, but like Gene definitely likes to play things by the book. But the kind of cool thing, and that I found with Gene's GMing style, is that he knows the rules so well, and he knows how stat blocks work, and CRs kind of don't matter, but they kind of
they
do.
don't fucking matter.
They super don't matter. But he knows those things so well that he can introduce really cool mechanics into fights, or really cool, oh, when you use this ability, this tags off. Like Gene, again, that's the way Gene's brain works, the way his GM style comes across. And he's a great storyteller, but I know that for me, I am a very much more rule of cool, right? And again, I think it's important that with the relationship between player and GM, of, sometimes your GM is not going to, a lot of people use the word railroading like it's this sort of the devil, and it's Satan, and it is the worst thing that ever happened. And don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating railroading. But what I'm saying is there's going to be times where your GM is like, okay, so you're doing this thing, and you go to and you're like, I jump off the mountain and I start sliding down on the back of a turtle shell. Okay, cool. And if you have a creative, if you have this sort of rule of cool, go with it sort of GM, they're going to take over that scene a little bit, and you're going to be part of that story, but they're going to kind of, it's going to be a little more guided. And again, railroad is, people can see it like, oh, you took away the agency of my character. And again, I hope no one's agency is ever taken away. That's maybe not the best GM tool. But my advice for anyone with a player GM relationship is, if you're going to do something crazy and out of the box, and your GM makes a sort of a ruling based on, hey, we're going to make this work. You want to kick flip off the dragon and land on the griffin that's riding below it? Cool. We're going to make some rolls and figure that out. Just go with it. And trust me, I've literally been that character of, hey, I backflip onto that dragon's back and fight it for 2 rounds. And Gene's like, cool, that sucks for you. And I was like, yes, it does. um, but like, just if there is this sort of out of the box scenario, or maybe even slightly in the box scenario, it goes back to that faith and trust. If your GM makes a a rule of cool, hey, this is happening sort of thing, just go with it. I don't know, Gene. What do you got for me?
I mean, back to when you were talking about me, I like it when rules can tell a story. So if I can use these rules to tell the story of the game, I think that's awesome. And sometimes there are not rules for it, and so you got to make it up as a GM. And your players might want to do something crazy, like you said, and you got to be like, "Yep, roll me a number. We'll see if you hit the number I liked," and that's
I mean,
okay.
I'm definitely that player. Like, I'm
Yeah,
definitely that.
and I'm with it. I'm into it. I love it. I think it's great. But I also like the idea of, like you said, if you can use the rules to tell the story, you might as well.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so I guess kind of going on with that is where, as a player, you don't really want to tell or make an assumption. You should always feel comfortable to ask your storyteller, because that's part of that faith thing, part of that respect. Because you know what? Like you said, Ren, you're going to do some fucking cool off the bat using a rope of climbing that is definitely not what it's used for thing, and that's okay. And you need to, as a player, have faith that your GM hopefully will do something cool with it, or at least let you try. And the worst thing that happens is they go, I don't think it works like that. And then you come up with something else and you continue with the story.
Right.
Like, I remember a game where I was in a parlor LARP, and me and my friend Brennan, we were on a hospital bed, and we had to escape the hospital. And I looked at the GM dead in the face and said, I'd like to make this hospital bed grind the rails. And he was like, "What?" I was like, "Well, I'm a skater boy, so I have all these skills in like super skate skill." And he was like, "That's fucking insane. You need to pull like one of the highest numbers in this card game, in this random generator." And then I just fucking pulled it, and he was like, "You fucking grind the rails." And then we just like we go on this adventure grinding the rails, clubbing people with a pipe on our way out, smashing through hospital doors, and that was awesome. It wasn't in the
That's a
rules.
great story, a
It
great
wasn't,
experience.
but it was like, yeah, you could do it, but it's going to be impossible. But
Yeah.
giving that little chance of possibility is really, I think, the magic that kind of comes with
Oh
having
yeah.
faith in your GM.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great story. And to that end, I think it's important to realize, not just with your GM, but with the other players, is that everyone at the table is a storyteller. Yes, your GM's got a little more of that arbiter role of deciding if things succeed or fail. The dice kind of do that for you too, but everyone here is there to tell a story. And so, being respectful with everyone at the table, having faith in your GM, like all of these things that we've kind of been talking about form this sort of big bubble of, if everyone kind of plays with these things that we've been discussing, everyone gets a chance to tell part of a story. But that story's got seven voices, if there's six people in a GM or five people, whatever the case may be. And there's going to be twists and turns in that story. There's going to be things you don't expect, and I think that's kind of why this hobby has attracted as many people as it is. Why it's has been as popular as it has been since the '70s, um, is because it's this kind of collaborative storytelling thing that you kind of don't get in other places. Like D&D, gaming, tabletopping, LARPing, these are ways of telling stories that we don't experience much in our day-to-day lives. Watching TV shows, movies, reading books, that is a way to experience a story very much as an audience with narrative being presented. It's very rare that you get to create narrative in a live, moment to moment, beat to beat kind of way. And using a lot of these tools that we talked about, you know, you, it's one of those things that we always say, Gene, right? Everyone should GM once, right? It doesn't matter if you're the most creative person in the world or if you can't shut up like me, and you just have to like get these ideas out of your brain, or you'll shave parts of your head and grow a mohawk. Um, like everyone should GM once because you get to experience this storytelling angle from a new perspective. And again, any time that we can add new perspective to our repertoire, gaming or otherwise, the better, cooler, more interesting people we are. So yeah, I mean that's my long-winded answer to that part.
Yeah. No. And again, I know we're fucking beating this dead horse, but don't be afraid to fail. You know,
Yeah, we talked about that a bunch. I don't
but
know that we need to.
but to kind of go in that where it's your GM is not out to get you. Your GM is not there to slay you. They're there to tell the story. They're part of the conflict to make you grow. And they're collaborators, not adversaries. Like at the end of the day, I know Julia running Curse of Strahd is not trying to hurt my personal feelings. She might be trying to kill my character, but that's part of the world. That's
She
Strahd.
will kill my character. I'm upset.
That is the world settings. And
Yeah,
so you have to respect that and understand that your GM is not there to kill you. They're there to challenge you. They're there to make you and your character think out the box of what is happening. And and so that's kind of the whole idea of like they're still your friends, but they need to be the world. They need to be the adversaries. They need to be your allies. But they have to do it all. And so you got to give them a little bit of leeway on that because it's complicated. It's hard.
it's a lot.
And
It's a
there
lot.
and I think Renny, you can really touch on how you can kind of support them in that in the next part.
Right. Yeah. No, I think I think that's a great point, Gene. And we talked about engagement and awareness. Um, but that's kind of beyond this courtesy, kindness, respect, faith, trust. One of the ways that you can respect a lot of the work that goes into storytelling, and I can tell you, Gene can tell you, anyone who's GM'd for longer than 5 minutes can tell you that it takes work. It takes a lot of work, whether you're someone who preps a lot and you have pages of world history and encounters written and npcs, or you're someone who's very much a framework and I'm gonna jive it on the spot and we're gonna go places and do stuff. Doesn't matter what your process is, to have respect for that process, for that story, for that work that goes into it. One of the things you can do as a player, is to be engaged, is just to, when important names are dropped, maybe jot that down. When that super exciting event happened, be there for it. Don't be distracted. You know d- don't be talking to someone, and again, everyone's going to be a little different. There's going to be different styles, but being engaged with the story that's presented to you from your storyteller. And I think part of that too is do your best, and again, social cues being what they are, but do your best to give your storyteller room to describe the world around you. I mean, I know Gene and I have both dealt with. Listen, you're trying to describe this wonderful glade full of butterflies and still water, and someone's like, I want to make a perception check, and like, listen, I understand that players want to have this sort of agency in their world and their actions, but again, because we're in the dungeon of being a good player is letting your storyteller embellish, giving them the room to describe scenes, rooms, people's attire. And again, not every GM is going to go into the clothes the NPCs are wearing or the perfume they have on. But your GM is probably going to describe to you your setting, your surrounding, your atmosphere, and it's sort of being engaged and being respectful of that time at the same time. um because there's nothing worse to a GM to hear, and I think Gene can kind of mad libs finish this, is you enter a dark room. What's the first question that's asked, Gene?
I don't know.
Oh, it's I have dark vision. First thing
Oh
anyone
yeah,
says. I have dark vision.
yeah,
But again, just let your GM talk. Let them
yeah,
describe the world around you. Um, and Gene, I think this next part is. I mean, I think we could both talk about it, but I think you're the right person to talk about how to tell your story through your role play as a player. To give your GM sort of story cues and
yeah.
helps.
So because this is you're the player and you're playing a character. Um, Telling your story through your role play is huge, and it can be subtle things as reading a book that you always reference, or it could be specific costume you wear if you're at a live action event, or if when you play D&D, you dress up in character. It could also be your spiritual practices. You can go deeply into research about religious aspects that you want to tie into your character thing because it tells a story. Everything uh, in everything about storytelling is that everything you do kind of tells a story, and that relates to kind of a bit of sociology, where like when you watch a movie, you can tell who the villain is. You can tell what the scene is dark or important due to social cues that have been instilled into you. And because D&D, tabletop, live action, all of these things are forms of storytelling, you can use those same cues. I might describe this guy you're talking to as having a hawkish nose and slightly sunken eyes. And you get the assumption that he's probably a bit of a rake or a rogue, or he might be up to no good. And those are just kind of subtle things that have been ingrained, and especially colors. I know a lot of people use colors in their storytelling to signify good or bad, and you may not know it immediately, but you can subtly pick it up. And so all of these things, these like aspects, help you as a player tell a story, and also give your GM something to work with. So like, there might be like, they might describe like let's say a ghost hits you with their fear effect. Well, it's not that you see the ghost's true form; you see your worst fear. So maybe you describe to the GM what you see when you're under the effect of that fear. And
Yeah,
now that GM knows a little bit more, or you walk into a room and you smell and see your favorite thing. Well, what is it? And so that gives you a little bit of depth as a character to think on your feet, or you might have had it written in your 18-page backstory. But now, yep.
that's
hmm
that's me.
But now everyone involved in the experience, and especially your storyteller, has something to work with. It's a little bit more depth to your character. And so all of these are keys that help you, or all these are essentially brushstrokes that help you paint a fuller picture.
Nice. That was
Yeah,
well. That was good.
yeah.
That was real
I
sweet.
fucking
That
pulled
was
that
good.
prose out my butthole just to really
Yeah.
soft that.
Oh, on your butthole throws.
But yeah, so I think really it comes to making the bigger picture and taking the broad strokes, but also taking the small
The
strokes.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Um,
yeah,
if I can, Gene. So Gene is great at this. I like to do it as well. Is describing your actions. There's some GMs who like to kind of take those reins and be like, and you step up to the orc and you raise your sword high and it crashes on the shield, whatever the case may be. But especially when it comes to things that are personal to your character, I've always found, and anyone who watches Curse of Strahd will notice that Gene always describes how he casts his spells or his prayers from the Raven Queen. And it's always this sort of prayer format because as a cleric, every spell you cast is a prayer granted to you by your goddess. So Gene kind of plays up that aspect when he casts spells. And as Dominic, I like to incorporate material components or displays of light and power when I cast my magic. And again, these are just not only not like you're taking the weight off your storyteller's back, but you're giving story, you're giving story opportunity to the table. And something that I always like to think of is about inspiration and be to inspire and be inspired. Um, because I've seen this is something that me and Gene have done for years, and other people in our groups as well. Is that you describe your actions, your magic, things that are personal to your character, and it inspires other people to not only maybe they visualize the scene better. Maybe it inspires them to try to inject a little bit of personality into their own actions. And I mean, let me tell you, there is no cooler thing in this hobby of when a newer person or a less experienced person kind of comes to your table and starts to pick up these cool, gaming and role play sort of things that you do, or just the way you treat certain things. And like, when you build up better players around you, the cool thing is you're playing with better players. Like it's the coolest thing. And it's just one of those great things. Every character that I have that casts magic in any sense does it differently, because magic is a force of will, right? It doesn't matter if you're a wizard, sorcerer, cleric, paladin. It doesn't matter. There is a I am affecting reality in a way reality shouldn't be affected. How do I manifest my will? Yes, and D&D has use spell components and wiggle your fingers or whatever. But, you can take that a step further. You don't have to, but you can find, even as a player, that giving those story elements to your character is not only you're passing a baton to your GM to kind of give them insight, but to your other fellow players as well. You're giving them insight into your character. It might not be a big deal, but again, it's just another sprinkle of story with this fine brushstroke, as Gene so eloquently put.
Never gonna happen again.
Yeah, no, Gene, that was your one. So there's a thing. You lost all the initiatives, but you
I
had
got
this
the
one
killing
point.
blow. Ah!
Yeah. Um. So we're almost done with this room, and then we have one small but important room left. Um. And kind of the thing going off of all the things we said. Taking notes again. We talked about it a little bit, but it's just another way to show respect for the story, the game, the thing that you've all chosen to be part of.
It shows you
Uh,
care. It shows
yeah,
you care.
it shows that you care. And then the last thing is kind of how we talked about when you reach out to other players, when you want to maybe explore certain storylines or be involved in certain scenes with them. You can do the same thing with your GM. If you have an idea for a storyline or a plot line for your character and you're not sure it meshes with the current goings on, reach out to them. Because the worst case that can happen is, hey, your idea is really cool, but I'm taking the game in this direction. Or you get, hey, that's kind of cool. Let me work on it and see if I can incorporate it. And trust me, I'll say this a lot of times, your GM does a lot of work to build the story, build the setting, build all these things. And if you hand them free story, they're like, cool, thank you. I'll just put that in this my little sack of story and I'll pull it out later, you
Yeah,
know?
and to kind of go on that, I mean, like as a storyteller, while I know this is about the player. I know in my recent games, someone's like, I want to play this thing, and it's attached to this dark past, and I was like, oh, I already have a evil wizard plan for this campaign. Bam! Now you have a way into the game. Or I already have these plots intertwined, and you found this cool magic artifact weapon that's definitely not evil. Don't worry, I have something tied to it. It's cool. It's a big meta thing. And so you can just use those subtle things of your players' cues. And while you might have had a story you pre-wrote a bit of the outline, you can now take their character threads. Once as a player, just like I knew I gave the DM plenty of stuff for Warple. I just kind of was just like, here's a bunch of bullshit. I'm probably being hunted, and I was like, you do what you want with it. I'm done. Bye. But like now he has ties, and same thing for Julia and Strahd. Renny gave her a fucking ton of shit, and now she has giant things to do with him, and I have some ties because I have loved ones as my character, and so it's just like, hey, here's a thing, and your GM can take it or leave it, but now you
Right.
have it on the table. And again, asking permission, because there are some storylines that, as people, we're not comfortable exploring. Your GM might not be comfortable, your group might not be comfortable, and you need to respect boundaries.
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
always okay to ask permission, because worst comes to worst, they just say, no, I don't think that's how I want to take it.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Do we want to roll initiative for this last one so I can whoop you for 4?
Fine, only because it's a small bonus room.
It is. It is kind of a smaller.
You want to go first?
I mean, you went first last time. Didn't seem to help you. It's happening. Oh, I got okay. I did pretty good.
Oh
I
fuck!
did
Oh
pretty
fuck!
good.
Oh fuck! Oh! Oh!
It
Oh! Oh!
finally
Oh! I
happened.
get one room.
Dethroned. All right. Well,
Dethroned.
kick it off there, big man.
Thank the Nightbot for choosing me as your champion. So, this kind of comes a little bit. It's important because you need tools for every avenue, and this comes with this next room is dealing with negative issues, and there's a few ways to do it depending on how severe or serious the issue is, and depending on who you are and how you want to handle it. So obviously, the first and foremost is if there's a problem at the table, talk to your GM. They're the arbiter. They're the person, who is technically, Jesus God at your table. They control the fate of the world, but they also are kind of the linchpin of the group because without them, you don't really have a story. You just have a bunch of people who want to do the same thing with no one leading them. And
That's definitely not a paintbrush moment there, is it, G?
listen, God Sama, exactly. Yeah. Listen, I can only paint so many pictures. I'm not an artist. And so there are a few things like what I would suggest for the table. Again, opinions, which is talk to your GM personally after the fact. You don't really want to blow up a point in the middle of a game if it's going to really escalate or turn into something more serious. This can always be addressed after the fact unless it's an emergency that must be addressed in the matter. So you try to avoid arguments at the table, and that and you can also talk privately with the player if they've done something disruptive or thing that could be handled because you know them at assuming you are friends at the table, you can always do it as you address them personally afterwards. Maybe you have the GM as an arbiter if you don't want it to get too heated, or you just address the GM and trust that they will handle what needs to be handled. Um, then I guess really it comes down to you always want to de-escalate versus confrontation because de-escalation, you bring down it, you don't boil the fires, you don't set the irons, you let people cool off, and it gives it a chance to be looked at logically and reasonably because in the end you're still all friends or you're people who just want to play the game and have fun. And what takes away from that is everyone arguing or escalating and then everyone being mad. And I think really that finalizes with no hard and fast. Like, let your GM be the arbiter, but if you guys have a way of settling things,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Every table's a little different. Every group's a little different. There's no hard and fast rule on how to handle stuff. Talking to your GM always good. Talking to someone personally if you have that comfort level, that just that friendship, that's great. But that's not always the case. So these are honestly, I hate to say it, but a lot of these are just sort of guidelines. Um, but taking that moment away is really important. I think there's been so many times you get caught up in a scene, you get caught up in emotions, and as much as you want to try to separate these egos or these people, it can be hard, especially if you are having some powerful emotional stuff. What happens in larping a lot. You get this thing called bleed, which people talk about, where emotions and actions and stuff that happen in the game kind of affect your real life because as much as it was a person who's imaginary, you did all those things. You went through all those things. So, taking some time away from it and then reapproaching it with a cooler head, with, having some time to think about it's always good. But talking to your GM, great. Talking to the person who's responsible. And we're not going to go through all the negative things that can happen, possibly cheating, possibly someone being offensive at the table or disrespectful. Like, there's a lot of scenarios that can happen that can take away from that fun. But listen, it is a game, end of the day. And if there's a group that doesn't fit with your ideologies, doesn't make you feel comfortable or respect you, there's other groups out there. And this is a big hobby. There's a lot of us. There's a lot of you. Um, and you can find groups that are more accepting. So I've heard so often about people who have these crappy games and they go back and da da da. And I'll be honest, I don't like to leave games, but if I'm not having a good time at a game, guess what? I'm not going to play that game. There is a saying, and I'm sure I'm not the first, last, or person to say it, but I would much rather have no gaming than bad gaming. um, because bad gaming can put you in a bad mood and it can affect your real life and it can just bring you down. But listen, if that never happened or you don't go to those negative places, they don't affect you. So yeah, sadly, as much as we do have some experience in the negative issues, there is no hard and fast rule. Just try to be kind and respectful. Kind of with everything else we talked about. Um, but Gene, I think it's time. I think we've battled this dungeon pretty fiercely, and I think it's
Sure.
time for the room of reflection.
Dun, dun, dun,
Reflection,
dun.
reflection, reflection, reflection.
It's the fountain of reflection currently, but it could be the room of reflection. It's the
Is the
pool. The pool is.
fountain
But no, it happened. They're arguing that it's not reflective enough.
well, so guys, this and gals, this is sort of our area. If you've put questions in the chat, our moderator has dutifully and wonderfully, thank you again, kind of collated them, and we're gonna answer some questions, and we may have covered it. You may have asked it, and then we talked about it. Who knows? But this is we're gonna answer some of your questions. Then we're gonna kind of stare deeply into the pool of reflection, and yeah.
I don't know.
So what do we got?
I don't know if we. I think we answered a lot of these questions
It's very possible.
as they came, but I know I noticed Mama Shady talking about having your kids at your table, and it's a little hard to kind of curb that and not be a parent. And I'd like to give a story. So I was running a game pre-quarantine for a group of my LARP friends and their children. And the children, learn the rules and they occasionally need help, but they're one of the kids was playing a druid, and it was Lost Mines of Phandelver, which is one of the greatest modules. And he blew me out of the water when they were in a room with a big fight and there was a wolf. And he's like, I cast animal friendship. And I was like, what? And I had no idea. I was like, I've never used that
She's
fucking.
like, I've never taken that spell my
I've
whole life.
never taken that spell my whole life. And it was just such a proud moment that this kid, without, the parents' guide, knew their own spells and found one that worked perfectly for the situation. Of course, I failed the fucking save. And they got a wolf friend, and it changed the course of that fight tremendously. And it was just awesome to watch this kid grow, and really thank you, players and creators, for rating us. But
hey, what's up, guys?
we've been talking about you. Only bad, good things.
Only bad things.
Mostly, I always lie. He always tells the truth. I don't know. No, but no, it's a little bit is helping them at the table get ready is what you can do, and then let them kind of grow. Like I know, like for the kid who was doing all those animal shapes, I helped him out by giving him a specific stat blocks per animal, so that he didn't have to keep questioning what his pluses were. And like, it's a little bit of math, but all their parents insisted that they did, and they're younger, they're like teenagers, so like 12, 13. So like, but their parents made them do all their own personal math to those things. And so it was like we would take that moment to let them do it. It might take a little bit extra, but that's cool.
Gene, nobody walked us through Thaco. We
Listen,
went
listen.
uphill, calculating AC 0 both ways.
But I have a -8 armor class because I'm wearing magical plate mail. How do I hit that?
No, that's great, man. And listen, you have to adjust for your table. Like every table's different. And if you've all as a group sort of decided to let younger people listen, it can, like Gene said, you can have those wonderful experiences of things happen that you don't expect. I mean, that's always the case in any game, that things are going to happen that you don't expect. But I'll tell you, kids, especially that younger, they are going to do stuff you never dreamed of. And sure, maybe you gotta curb your fucking language, but it's still, you can still have a really, I mean, listen, me and Gene were those kids at tables full of adults triple our age. When we were young, we went to conventions a lot, and there was just, they had these sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, Gene? Not Adventures League, sanctioned. What am I saying?
The RPGA?
Yes, well, it's the RPGA, but it's sort of sanctioned D&D. And listen, we knew the rules. We had read the books. Like, nobody could be like, well, what's an armor class, kiddo? Like, we knew our shit. But, we were 10, 12, 13, hanging out with 40-year-olds. And, there was times that we were really, really good at tables, but we were also kids. So there was probably
Yeah, we
times that
were
we don't
little fucking shits.
that we were tiny little shits. But again, D&D is one of those games that you age, as long as you can read and do a little math, you can play, and that's the beauty of it. I'm seeing some questions here. Gene, you want to do the first one? I'll do the next
Oh
one.
yeah, I want to add on to you real quick. And especially with 5th edition D&D, its accessibility to
huge.
is crazy compared to the other editions of it, and it's just a very, I'd say, easier game to learn and get into, and has a much nicer learning curve than like.
Yeah, we learned 2nd edition AD&D, and D&D being advanced was a big deal.
Yeah, when you got your book about being a halfling and what kind of cool specialty classes you could be.
I still have those.
I know you do. All right. So, first question, curated, very important, very serious. What is your favorite color?
Blue, no yellow. No, I mean, listen, I think I blue probably. Hair, nails, blue.
I mean,
pants.
When I was younger, green was my favorite color. But I think I kind of grew into like red. But I still love green, but red's a solid color, and so is purple.
Nice. Yeah, I like pink a lot too. Excellent. All right, I got the next one. Gene, if you could be a D&D class in real life, what would it be?
All right, well that's the query. Does it come with all the requirements of that class? So like, what do I think I could be? Like what do I think I could possibly be as a class, or like what do I hopeful would want to be as a class?
Do both. What do you think you would be? What would you want to be?
I think realistically, I would be a rogue. Because
yeah. See, people don't know it, but Gene's a sneaky shit.
I'm really good at breaking and entering on the DL.
He's really sneaky, and you think he's one thing, but he's not.
Yeah, I have very sharp like finding things and getting things and making pizzas appear when I'm hungry, or bag sandwiches.
Gene, we had one rule, and that rule was no bag sandwiches.
That's not it. And then if I could be any class, let me get this. I would be a bard.
I cannot play you. I cannot believe you just played a Vuvuzela on our first episode. You trash monster.
I always have a Vuvuzela in reach.
So, what class would I want to be? I feel like there's only one right answer, and it's wizard. If I had to choose, I would be a wizard. Um, if the class that I would be is bard. I'm a storyteller. I schmooze. You've never seen me on a bender, but I assure you, it fits.
It's
Um,
legendary. He could get Reddy can talk people into just things that shouldn't be
whoa,
possible.
whoa, yeah, true. All right, Gene, you go next.
All right. I'm assuming this is from Sally.
100%,
100%. What is your ideal charcuterie board? Well, I'm not fancy about charcuterie, but I'm assuming that's fancy cheese. I don't really do charcuterie boards. That's a Julia thing. Yeah, but I would go with like I don't know.
How are you alive? How are you alive?
Listen, I would go with probably a lot of cheddar, different cheddar. I love cheddar. I don't really like any other cheeses because I'm lactose intolerant. I'd probably go with pepperoni and some
Do you love pepperoni?
and grapes.
Nice, great,
That's
solid choice.
that's my choice.
All right, if we're gonna go like ideal charcuterie board, so like sky's the limit, right? So we're definitely gonna have bacon wrapped dates, maybe a little cream cheese or a soft cheese in the center. We're gonna have beeswax honey on there and like chunks of beeswax. Of course, you need some crackers or something so you can make your tiny little finger sandwiches. I'm a super big fan of the cracked salt and pepper Triscuits. That's me. Um, Aged Parmesan, goat cheese, um, blueberries, raspberries. I mean, I could go fucking on. But and the last thing is I probably have you gotta have a little bit of meat on there, right? I guess some cured ham. Um, oh, there's a piece of pig, porchetta. If I can manage it. Yeah, so that's mine. I guess.
Someone's a fucking foodie.
All right, I guess I'll do the next one. Gene, why the ketchup
I mean,
pretzel?
we all know the obvious answer that ketchup is superior on pretzels, and everyone's gonna argue with me. I need mustard, but they're wrong, and I'm gonna explain. I'm gonna explain to you why. So, pretzels and bagels are essentially the same exact thing. They're baked nearly identically. In the dough, it's the same texture. It is. Don't lie to yourself. It's the same taste. If you get an everything bagel or a salt bagel, it tastes pretty much just like a pretzel. All right. Next, if you get a hot bagel sandwich, you put ketchup on it. Like if you get bacon, egg, whatever, cheese on a bagel, I put ketchup on it because it tastes better. Now, if you don't have all the other stuff and you put ketchup on your pretzel, just imagine that just without the bacon, egg, and cheese. And it's the same exact thing. And I also really don't like mustard. I think mustard's super fucking gross. And I love pizza sauce. I love marinara. You can ask Renny. I would get marinara for every meal. And really, ketchup is just a poor man's marinara.
All right, guys, this just in. Gene's a crazy person and literally drinks ketchup with his meals.
That is not true. I don't like ketchup, actually. I like marinara more, but it's just ketchup's more readily available.
All right, so Gene, this last one is for you. It feels very slanted, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You've seen Mama Shady play, Gene. How can she play better? I mean, we did talk about what it means to be a better player.
Yeah.
So,
I think Mama Shady does a lot of things right with like supporting other people, being part of the team, being prepared, doing all that stuff. I think to help you out, Mama Shady, would be owning your magic. So I know you're a spellcaster. Fucking describing it cool, giving it your own flair. I know you're, I think, a dragonborn now, so like maybe like accessing your draconic ancestry and stuff and mixing it in. Just like kind of and like bring in those personal aspects of your character. I don't know too much about your new character because I've only listened to a few of the current episodes, but I don't know. I don't know much about the book. Like I said, I've only saw your first few because that episode or so where you were gone, I didn't. But like use the aspects like the character features you have to help tell your story. So if you got a sweet book, use that. If you got, talking about, you know, I don't know, other things to go with that, but like use your backstory, use the aspects of what makes that character, because I know you put a lot of thought into it, and just like giving yourself those little personal goals, give yourself those little moments to mention in game. Like I know you were the one like doing the map collection, dabbling a little bit more into that kind of stuff.
All
um
right. Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry. I didn't know
no,
you were done.
no,
Okay. Well, that is only part one of the Rube of Reflection, Pool of Reflection, whatever, Fountain of Fortune, whatever the fuck we want to
fountain
call it.
of reflection.
All right. So the other part of it is we kind of want to sort of, we're going to kind of take everything that we talked about, and we're just going to sort of bottle it down in this moment of reflection. And Gene, if you don't mind, I'll go first. I mean, I went first like all the other times.
Fuck you.
So if you don't mind, I'll go first, and then
Yeah.
I'm gonna pass it off to you, and then we'll kind of do some shout outs and have send everyone off with a good evening. So really, right, storytelling is part of our DNA. You know, from the moment we had fire, we told stories around that fire. The storytelling is so important to our society, to our development, to our culture. And this activity, this hobby that we partake in, it it's one of the most enriching that I have found, one of the most enriching kind of ways to tell stories. Like, don't get me wrong, I love my comics, I love my movies, I love my TV shows. Sure, they're slanted a little fantasy sci-fi, but I know what I like. But this gaming kind of hobby, I think one of the reasons, besides we got into it when we were young, but I think it's one of the reasons that we kind of keep coming back to it is that using all these tools that we talked about, and I'll be honest, people listening out there, some of these behaviors we did not practice when we first started. And as we grew, as we dealt with more and different and varied people, we found that some of these aspects, some of these traits that we kind of talked about at length are kind of the keys to success, to making these joint narratives. And, listen, I might not be the prettiest man or the fastest runner or the strongest guy, but I can tell a damn good story, and I hope that I can continue to tell those stories with people until they put me on the shelf and Gene orders my death. Um,
Do you still have that life insurance?
no, so fuck
Fuck.
you.
Yeah, you could live a
Um,
little bit longer.
but yeah, so I guess my kind of takeaway is respect, kindness, inclusion, faith and trust, all these things not only make you a better person, maybe inside game, maybe outside game, but they help us tell better stories. And the more stories we get to tell with more interesting and varied people, the cooler this thing called life is. So, yeah, let's tell more fucking stories.
And I think for me, not as awesomely philosophical, is as a good player, be respectful. Like we're all here to have fun, so bring your fun. Like bring the fun, and what you're gonna give as good as you get. So if you bring fun and other people bring fun, it's just gonna be awesome. And so being a good player is about respect and having fun and trying not to lose yourself in those moments. to remember that it's just a game, and you're here to have fun. And that's, I think, my piece. But I got some shout outs, which is we had some
Shout it out.
people join the channel between and also during. So thank you, Neil, not Jim, for following us. Thank you, Jocelyn Go Boom, which is my friend Michaela. Thank you,
Nice.
86 Me Daddy, which is definitely Sally.
That's 100% Sally.
And yeah, that's real weird for me to read, but I did it.
Dead.
I committed.
Dead.
But thank you all for joining us, players and creators. Thank you for rating us. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and thank you for just interacting. If you guys want to send us topics to maybe talk about that you're interested in, Renny and I will just keep making them up and figuring out what we want to do.
Yeah,
but
well, we'll just do what we want. But if you have some really good suggestions,
yeah,
hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, maybe Instagram too. And if you could tag it with @Dungeon Delvers, so we know to look for it for our show. Listen, if there's a topic that you think is just a good thing to talk about for other gamers, for other people, and again, people who have some experience can talk about. It's a lot of our opinion, but through the lens of experience. But yeah, so this is our first episode about being a good player. We might talk about being a good storyteller at some point. We might talk about a number of things.
Or if you're like, hey, I want you guys to talk about D&D, Renny and I will just rant about fucking D&D.
Just get ready, because we'll talk about D&D.
But yeah, we can talk about many different subjects that we are interested in. And also, if you guys are interested in hearing about things that we might be able to talk about, we would love to do that. So, like Renny said, check out our Twitter at Uncom Heroes. Our Instagram is Unconventional Heroes, and pretty much they're that way. Yeah, nope, yeah, named it. And then we're gonna wrap up from here, and on our wrap up page, we're gonna be listed all the artists who gave away the free art to make this like 2D dungeon that I made in 3D Paint, but they gave all these files for free, and as long as you credit them. And so we're gonna switch over to the wrap up, and we're gonna figure out a scheduled time to do this. But this was our first test run. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
And we'll see you next time.